Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. So the title of this live, and I might have a little confused it because I set a reminder for everyone, and I'm hoping that people aren't waiting on somewhere else for this. I'm still getting used to Facebook Live. So anyway, the subject of this live is a really important one. The difference between shadow and the dark side. And I first of all want to define those terms because I think there's a lot of confusion about it, and at least the way I perceive those terms. So shadow for me are aspects of ourself, aspects of our consciousness that are in contraction, that we haven't learned to love yet, that we haven't learned to bring back into consciousness, that we haven't learned yet to embrace. So that for me is a definition of shadow. It's the part of us that's in constriction. It's the part of us that's maybe more unconscious than we're willing to admit. Okay. And then when I talk about dark side, I'm really talking about a very famous alchemical maxim. It's one of the classic alchemical. It's from the Emerald Tablet. And one of those, on that Emerald Tablet, there's this very precise statement. And that statement is, as above, so below. So there's a misunderstanding often in many spiritual traditions and spiritual belief systems in groups that somehow or other heaven, or, the higher dimensions, somehow or other have no dark side. And of course, in Christianity, we learn about that dark side. We talk about Lucifer, as the dark side. And there's a tendency, I think, in what I call modern spirituality to sort of poo-poo that and say, oh, the dark side, it doesn't really exist. There's nothing out there that wants to hurt us. And I 100% disagree with that. I think there is a dark side agenda. As above, so below. In other words, where is all this internal conflict coming from? Where is that coming from? As above, so below. So, and there's many stories and myths about a war in heaven. Yeah, it's not like a war that we perceive of. It's not like a physical war, so to speak. It's more like, we could say, a disagreement between creator gods and goddesses. So I want to make it clear that this as above, so below maxim is not talking about the source, which in my tradition we call Taiyi, or the great central sun. In other words, we could put a word on that like God, yeah, if we wanted to. But I love the Taoist, Taiyi, great oneness. Okay, so that's the definition of source: great oneness, unity consciousness. Okay. And that unity consciousness steps itself down. And when it steps itself down, it starts to step itself down into some type of duality, light and dark. So there is a dark side. There is a side that doesn't want human souls who are gifted free will from source. They're gifted free will from source, that doesn't want human beings to use their free will, to exercise it in a conscious way. And in a way, that part of the dark side's agenda, as far as I can see, is to make the human experiment, the souls coming into this very dense dimension, fail in some way. There's an agenda that wants us to fail, that wants our love and our exercising of free will to fail. And so this is the agenda of the dark side. The agenda of the dark side is very simple. It believes in hierarchy, it believes in power structures, and it doesn't really support love. Yeah, or the exercisement of our will to choose love in any moment. So it's very important to understand this distinction, because I think a lot of us, we forget this. We forget that there is a dark side agenda that doesn't want us to exercise our free will, that doesn't want to use that free will in a responsible way, and wants to seduce us in some way. And it sounds sort of very, you know, like somehow out of our control and out of it. But once we're aware of it, and hence this live, you know, hence to make this live, there's a real need for us to become aware that there is a dark side agenda that wants human beings to stay in suffering, to stay in contraction. And, you know, there is an incredible amount of contraction around the Earth realm, around this sphere, this dimension we call Earth, you know. And basically, anytime you exercise your free will and you choose love and you remember where you come from source, you come from somewhere much deeper than these agendas, you know, then you're supporting the unfoldment of free will and love. Okay, so it's really important to understand that when we start to contemplate something like source, there's a tendency that we all have to project onto the source human qualities. And that's one of the things in my courses I try and really remind people not to do that, you know, because my experience of the source is it's pure love, pure will, and complete detachment. Complete, I mean, you could even say indifference, yeah. And that's a very strong word, right? But because we're given free will from source, this is where this complete detachment comes. This is the important quality here. So it's very important to never give up your free will. And there are many misunderstandings around this. Yeah. So there's a misunderstanding between free will and surrender. Okay. So what does surrender mean? Surrender means recognizing within ourselves that we have more refined levels of consciousness deep inside of us. Yeah. So surrender means surrendering to that. But it doesn't mean giving up our individual will. And this is a really important distinction that I really want to bring into consciousness, because so many spiritual groups, you know, organizations, you know, they're basically, you know, leaning themselves to the positive side. And they're saying, look, positive is what's important. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to say there's something wrong with that. It's a strategy that works, you know, because where the mind goes, the chi flows. So it's definitely an approach, okay? And in the beginning, it can be very, very important. But ultimately, we want to get to a place where we're not taking sides with the positive or the negative. We want to cultivate what the Taoists call Yuan Qi, this original neutral force. Because that's what the source is made up of, is this incredible love, but at the same time, complete detachment, you know. And it's really hard for us as a human being to get a handle on that. We can understand it intellectually, but actually we have to start to experience it inside ourselves. We have to cultivate this Yuan Qi, this neutral force that's inside every single one of us. And the more we cultivate that inside of us, the less we're going to be swung between the positive, the dark side and the light side, okay? The less we're going to swing that, you know, and the dark side cannot touch us in a way. The more neutral we get, the more we align with source, the more we align with our central channel, the more we align with this deep core self inside each and every one of us. The dark side cannot touch that, because it dissolves. It dissolves when it comes in touch with that neutral force. Everything dissolves. That's what forgiveness is, by the way. It's a dissolving force. Okay, so let's get really clear. There is a dark side agenda that doesn't want human souls to exercise their free will and to choose love, you know. And they seduce. This agenda seduces people into power structure, into hierarchy, and basically power before love. Yeah. So be really careful with that, because the choice is always love, right? And if you look at the choices in your life, if you look time and time again, it's always going to be these two choices: power or love. Yeah. And so love is embracing, love is dissolving, love is accepting, love is neutralizing. It's neutralizing our polarized charge inside of us. Yeah. Okay. So we have a shadow side that is not the same as the dark side. The dark side is more like a collective energy field that, and are at many levels. That dark side has many levels to it. So the one way we can make sure we're not influenced by the dark side is through cultivation of our neutral core. It's so important to cultivate the neutral core. Okay. And the more you do that, the more you cultivate the neutral core. So for example, Wu Jigong is designed for that. It's designed to connect your core with the core of the earth, the core of the sun, the core of the cosmos. So we have these central alignments all the time that are deeper than the yin and the yang patterns. And that is the whole purpose of inner alchemy. That, I believe, is the whole purpose of the Gene Keys transmission. It's certainly the purpose of my work with OFT, is teaching and having practitioners around at body level who can hold this neutral space, okay, and not flip into the positive or the negative. So it's a very important work, and it's the only thing worth cultivating, because basically what you're cultivating every time you cultivate neutral force is you're cultivating that within you that can never die. And so it's the only thing that we can take with us from this dimension: how much we've cultivated our connection to the source, how much we've aligned with that, how much we've identified with that aspect of ourselves. And as far as I can see, it is the most important thing we can do in our life. This body will leave, all of our toys will leave, all of our money, all of our power, everything will leave. And the only thing that we will take with us is our cultivation practice, what we've managed to cultivate here in this dimension that is present in other dimensions. And that's the whole purpose of inner alchemy. It's the whole purpose of my mission in this world, is to train others in these practices, because they are so important. And they're beyond the intellect. They're beyond awareness practices. They're about bringing solidity to awareness, bringing actually body and substance to awareness, so that we have a sense that our soul has solidity. Okay, because when we look at our physical body, we say, oh yeah, that's really solid. I can do things with my body, that's solid. But my soul, oh my God, my soul seems so nebulous, so far away. It's nice to think about it, but when it comes to the bottom line, I don't really trust it. I trust my mind, I trust my emotions, I trust my body, but my soul, it seems so far away. And for most of us, that's true. We haven't cultivated the soul. We haven't cultivated our soul to give it substance in this dimension. How do you know when you've cultivated the soul? You develop more of this neutrality deep inside of you. It feels very much like detachment, but it also feels very loving. That's the best way to describe it. It's detachment, it's loving, and it's always present. In many traditions, it's called the witness, but we have to give it substance, and we have to start to shift our identity to that. And definitely inner alchemy practices, Wu Jigong, the inner alchemy immortality practices are all designed to develop what we call the immortal body, or giving substance to your soul, so that when you leave this dimension, when you leave this physical dimension, you actually have will in the physical dimensions. So it's very important to understand that our souls, they don't have will in the physical dimension, in the spiritual dimensions. Everything's merged. So it's very evolutionary for souls to develop substance and to develop will and to take that back into the deeper dimensions. That is an evolutionary step forward in evolution. And a lot of times it's not talked about. In many spiritual traditions, they talk about just surrender to the source, you know. And I think that's actually a dark side agenda, this idea of giving up your individual will and surrendering to something higher than you. Okay, it's really important to understand the difference in my experience. Yeah, so it's about using our will in a responsible way. What is a responsible way? A responsible way is to bring more love, harmony, and balance into this dimension. That's why we're given individual will. That's why the human experiment, the dark side doesn't like, because it doesn't want to see this succeed on some level. Yeah? In a way, they're a little bit upset that free will has been given to human beings. So I hope this is clarifying for a lot of you. Are there any questions? I see a lot of you have joined in. It is really joy to be around you. Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So before I end the live, is there any questions about this dark side and the shadow? No questions? Yeah. Thank you, Andrew, for this live, Delia. Okay, great. You're welcome. I was inspired this morning about this. I was thinking a lot about it in my own life, you know. And yeah. And I'm really passionate about inner alchemy. You know, you can probably feel that I'm very passionate about this cultivating of our immortal self, you know. So immortality in the Taoist tradition doesn't mean that you live forever, right? It's not a physical immortality, it's a spiritual immortality. As above, so below. So when a human soul incarnates, it takes on a personality, it takes on different aspects of the collective, of the human collective. And if that soul can integrate what it's taken on, you know, so it takes on a bloodline, it takes on ancestral patterns, it takes on all these types of things, you know. And if you actually integrate all of that, that's evolution. And if you take that back into the deeper dimensions and you take back some will that you can then use in the spiritual dimensions, that is evolution. That is an evolutionary movement. And the Taoists call this heaven on earth, or a new heaven on earth. And it has a lot to do with integrating the masculine and the feminine within each one of us. So our soul is androgynous. And so that's one of the first healing steps, actually. If we want to resolve this split between spirit and matter, we first have to resolve the split internally and externally between the feminine and the masculine, between these two big splits that happen, which is at the root of all of this dark side agenda, actually, is this split between the feminine and the masculine, and why there's so much pain in that. You know, it's at the root of everything, in my experience. So I hope this has been clarifying for everyone. Nice to see you. Miss you in your classes. Well, you can come and join. I'm in Bucharest in October. I'm going to be doing something on liberating from our past. So I'll be back. I'll be back in Bucharest on the 11th, 12th, and 13th of October. I'm just off to Bulgaria now to do a Venus sequence retreat. So I'm quite excited about that. So yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. As I don't see other questions, I will be quiet now. Maybe we just put a little bit of music on and just finish. Bye.